Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this session of the 2020 International Nurse Researcher Hall of Fame. The International Nurse Researcher Hall of Fame honors Sigma Theta Tau International members who have achieved significant and sustained national and/or international recognition for their work, and whose research has impacted the profession and the people it serves. This year, we are recognizing 19 distinguished nurse researchers, and Sigma President Rick Ricciardi will be speaking with a few of them during this Hall of Fame session. The presentation of the International Nurse Researcher Hall of Fame is sponsored by Wiley. Wiley works with Sigma staff and editors to publish Sigma's peer-reviewed Journal of Nursing Scholarship and Worldviews on Evidence-Based Nursing, both of which are among the top nursing journals globally and are free to Sigma members as a membership benefit. On behalf of the Sigma Board of Directors, we thank Wiley for their continued support. And now, we have a brief greeting from Wiley. The 5 Hall of Fame honorees in this session are Dr. Holly Devon, Professor and Associate Dean for Research at the University of California, Los Angeles, California, USA. Dr. Linda Frank, Professor and Jack and Elaine Cohn Endowed Chair in Pediatric Nursing at the University of California, San Francisco School of Nursing in California, USA. Dr. Mary Jo Gilmer, Professor and Co-Director, Pediatric Palliative Care Research Team at Vanderbilt University School of Nursing in Nashville, Tennessee, USA. Dr. Joan Lappy, the Chris Bairn Professor of Nursing, Associate Dean for Research, and Professor of Medicine at Creighton University College of Nursing in Omaha, Nebraska, USA. And Dr. Bukola Salami, Associate Professor at the University of Alberta, Faculty of Nursing in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Full biographies for all our honorees are available in the Honorees and Award Recipients booklet in the Resources area of the conference website. I encourage you to read about the outstanding work of these researchers. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Sigma President Rick Ricciardi as he talks with our honorees. Enjoy the conversation.
Hi, I'm Rick Ricciardi, and I'm thrilled to serve as president of Sigma Theta Tau International. And with me today are some terrific researchers who have recently been inducted into the Sigma Research Hall of Fame. So let me begin today's interviews and session with a big congratulations to all five of you for your tremendous work, efforts, your tireless research. I know how much time, energy, and what I like to call sweat equity goes into trying to conduct research. And so congratulations to you and welcome to the prestigious group of International Research Hall of Fame inductees. So since we have only 20 minutes today, I'm going to get right into it. And most of the questions, interest, and a lot of flavor around research from our members centers around the concept or the focus of how can we bridge the gap between research and clinical practice, or clinical practice and research, depending on how you look at it. So I'm going to start with Professor Devon and ask her, in her research, what strategies have you used to bridge the gap between research and clinical practice?
Thank you, President Ricciardi. So I have to start by saying I haven't practiced in the clinical setting for a long time now, but all of my research questions come from my 18 years as a critical care nurse. And all of my research has been clinically based in the coronary care unit, in the emergency department, or in the cardiology clinics. And I knew since I was a PhD student that I wanted to work directly with patients, particularly those suffering from heart disease. I was also interested in the start from studying sex differences and reducing the many disparities in heart disease that disadvantage women in particular. When I was a CCU nurse, I saw many disparities between my male and female patients. And I remember sending women to the cath lab and they were coming back predominantly negative. And I was always asking, why is this? Are we doing a poor job of assessing who really needs the diagnostic workup, or is it differences in their clinical presentation? So the way I have tried to bridge it is to always start thinking about what the problem is. Excuse me. So when I'm formulating research questions or aims, I'm asking about where's the gap and how are we going to do a better job of meeting the needs of our patients. So I have, as I mentioned, a little bias in favor of women, but that came about because for many years, women were excluded oftentimes from cardiovascular research. So there was a gap, and I intended to study women, and then I realized it was better to compare women directly head-to-head in the same cohort. So I love to talk about my research to the public and to schools, churches, and I like to think a lot about how this research can be translated to clinical practice or into implementation science.
Thank you very much, Professor Devon. That was quite informative and very helpful. Same question to Professor Salami. What strategies have you used to bridge the gap between your research and clinical practice?
My apologies for that. I turned off my mic. Thank you so much for the question and the opportunity to answer. My research has been largely community-based. I primarily work in immigrant communities and also with service providers and health service, immigrant service providers and health service provider. My research program is always interdisciplinary, so I have collaborated with people in women and gender studies, political science, and so on and forth. The main strategy that I use to bridge research gaps in research and clinical practice is active engagement of stakeholders throughout the research process, including determining what the research questions are. I have engaged diverse stakeholders in research process, including as members of the advisory committee. These stakeholders have also supported the translation of my work into policies and services, ensuring that research questions are responsive to the needs of practitioners and policymakers will help to facilitate the translation of knowledge to clinical practice. Another strategy that I have used is to build in capacity building efforts into my work. And this necessitates taking a strength-based approach. So one of the most recent studies that I conducted looked at mental health of Black youth in Canada. And one thing that I did is I trained and I built the capacity of Black youth to complete data collection themselves. And because they were so much invested in the work, they also supported the translation of the knowledge to practitioners and also to policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Salami, and appreciate your engagement with the policymakers, because we do know how much regulatory and statutory issues do affect our clinical practice and our ability to practice. So thank you for that. Moving along here, I'm going to move to Professor Frank and ask her, what do you consider the most important characteristics of a researcher?
That's a great question. I'd say there are four primary characteristics that help you succeed in your research. I think the first one is persistence, because research is not a smooth path. There are many bumps along the road. You might have a struggle to secure funding or to find the right partners to work with, or there might be other challenges in the environment. For example, right now we're going through a pandemic, and that has a big effect on research. Mm-hmm. The second and third characteristics I group together are flexibility and creativity. And that's because the goals change of research as new knowledge is added to our fields, and also as the environmental conditions change. So for example, in the current pandemic, a lot of our clinical research has been put on hold due to restrictions and protections placed in clinical areas. So we've had to get very creative and be very flexible in our approach to research, moving things to the virtual space, thinking about other ways to connect with participants and collect data in ways that maintain safety. So that's a very current example of the flexibility and creativity that's needed. And finally, I would say it's very important that we maintain characteristics of humility, because in research, you are always learning. There's new knowledge, you're adding new knowledge, others are adding new knowledge. And so it's a learning journey, and although we seek the truth, we are never truly there. And so it's a hugely important characteristics. And I find that the greatest learning I get is from our community and our participants in the research that we do, and that lived experience of illness and recovery is what both motivates and keeps me grounded in the work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor Frank. I do like the concept of humility, because particularly what I've seen lately in the research and scientific community around the coronavirus or COVID-19, and how the assumptions that we made in previous viral pandemics and public health crises have somehow interfered, I think, in our advancement in a novel coronavirus that acts and works so differently from what we've seen in the past, that people have had to backslide because they had made assumptions and were not humble in their understanding of how things change and how we need to adapt to that. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Professor Gilmer, I'm so impressed because of the work that you do around palliative care and with children, and how challenging and difficult that is. And knowing how much it does take an island, and it takes many different groups involved to be successful in that care. So I think question 3 is very appropriate for you in looking at what characteristics do you consider in determining who you want to include in your research team? When you build your team, what do you look for, and what characteristics do you look for?
Thanks so much for that question. I've had the privilege of working with marvelous research teams through the years. So the characteristics that stick out in my mind are, first of all, that they're good with people. They're team players. They have a desire to learn and grow, and motivation, of course, is a key part of that. They're flexible. They're respectful. They're ready to help in whatever way is needed.
Mm-hmm.
They're good listeners and problem solvers, and okay with making a mistake, trying and to see if it works. But of those characteristics, I think working well with people and being a problem solver are key to success. And they've led me to my program of research in assembling my research team. One example is when I held and I've always held a joint appointment, so to have tried to connect clinical with research. Throughout my career, I've had joint appointments at the children's hospitals. So at Vanderbilt School of Nursing and the Children's Hospital, as clinical director of the pediatric palliative care program, I was called to see a young adolescent girl, and I'll call her Katie. It's not her real name, but I'll call her Katie. She was actively dying after receiving 2 kidney transplants, and she rejected both of them and was finished with trying more transplants, and she didn't want to have dialysis for the rest of her life. So she made the choice not to have further treatment, which was just, of course, devastating for her parents, hard for her to make. And I had the privilege of going to meet her after she'd made this decision. I asked her if there was anything that we could do that might be helpful in her transition. And her response was, I really miss my dog. I wish I could see my dog. And I said, well, I don't know why I asked this, because Children's didn't allow dogs in the hospital at that time at all. They were a source of infection. And so I asked her what kind of dog she had. She had a black pug. And I thought, well, where do you live? She lived 3 hours away. There wasn't time for anyone to go and get her dog and bring it back. But my son had a black pug puppy. And I thought, I don't know if I should do this or not, but I went home. It was August in Nashville. I got my trench coat and I went to his condo and picked up the puppy and snuck it up to her room. I thought, if I lose my job, I don't want to work here anyway. So I brought the puppy into her room, and I didn't know how a 6-month-old puppy would respond, but it curled up under her arm and just stayed there. It didn't bark, it didn't pee on the bed, it just stayed under her arm, the crook of her arm, until she died. And that experience led me to think of, well, there must be, to use problem solving, there must be other ways to reduce the suffering of kids, but let's find out if this works for a majority of kids. How helpful can this be? So that clinical experience and having clinicians in the area and other members of my research team who said, yeah, let's try it, let's see. So that's led to our recent studies in the effect of animal-assisted interactions.
Well, thank you for that. That's quite a remarkable story and touching. And, I don't know if there's much one could say about that, but you were there and you provided, and you had a very special member of your research team who you snuck in.
Yeah, exactly.
So that expanded the question outside of the human parts of your research team, but other members of the animal kingdom that can come and help us to do our research. So thank you for that. So Professor Lappy, I want you to put your hat on, thinking back to when you were a novice researcher and knowing what you have now and knowing where you're at now. and knowing that people listening to you most of them are going to be in the novice or mid-career research category. So what advice would you give novice researchers to help them to jumpstart their research career?
That's a great question. And fortunately, I had people to give me some good advice when I started. I think one key point is to kind of look around and try to choose a research area that you can remain passionate about, because as you all know, when you're doing research, it isn't winning the Nobel Prize every day. There's a lot of down and dirty work to do. So something that you're really interested in, and sometimes that takes a little exploration. Another key point that I doubted when I was, the suggestion was made to me, was to kind of plan out a research trajectory. One of my mentors said, plan where you're going to, what your next projects will be for the next 5 years. And I thought, oh, I really have no idea, but I did it. And actually, I found that piece of paper years later, and I thought, I really followed remarkably close. But, we all know you follow your research where it goes, but you have to have long-range plans so that you focus. What I see with young faculty that I mentor, sometimes they're just all over the place because there's so many interesting things, but to really focus. And finally, I think this follows along really with what Dr. Frank said about humility. Don't be afraid to ask for advice and use mentors, and don't be shy. I think I can speak for all of us and a lot of other researchers who've had some success, that we're so excited about research. We're happy to share and to help. And so to reach out to people that you don't even know, except maybe you've seen a lot of their publications, you think, oh, I wish I could talk to that person. Go ahead and give it a try. The worst thing is they might say, sorry, I don't have time. But I think most of the time, you will find that researchers are very excited and willing to help as much as they can. So I hope that's helpful advice, and give it a try.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, it is very, very helpful advice to me, and I'm sure everyone else listening. So we have a few more minutes left. So I'm going to ask for brevity in the responses, and I want to get at two questions. So I'm going to ask Professor Devon, and to think about, and to please keep your response as short as possible, but what do you think, since Sigma is an international organization, and we have this question all the time from members, how can we be more collaborative on a global scale? So do you have any suggestions to listeners, how we as researchers could be more collaborative globally?
Yes, and I promise this is not a plant from you or anyone from Sigma, but one of the highlights of my career has been attending the International Research Congress. So I really would encourage scholars who are looking for global collaborations to attend international meetings and introduce themselves, like Dr. Lappy said, meet people, but also I would encourage them to apply for fellowships. I had a fantastic opportunity to study in Rwanda a couple of years ago through the Fulbright organization. So also take advantage of what may be available at your institutions, their International Research Office, and many of our schools of nursing have global programs. So I would highly encourage it. I have had so much wonderful opportunity through working with partners around the world.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. Wonderful advice. Now we're going to switch to a lighter note, thinking about most touching, funniest, or most interesting experience that you've had while you were conducting research or putting research together. Professor Salami, can you keep it short and give us some perspective on what touched you, or something funny, or a most interesting experience you've encountered?
I think the first one is asking my research assistant to order pizza that was allowed because we were having a diverse And he said, yes, I'm going to order pepperoni. He didn't know that pepperoni was pork. The second one was I once did an interview, and after I finished doing the interview, the participant asked me when it's going to appear on TV. So we had to go through the consent process over.
Wonderful, thank you. Professor Lappy, could you respond to that as well? Same question.
Yes, I did a study early on where I needed to do Tanner staging of sexual development in children. And as you can imagine, we were very, very careful about confidentiality and privacy, etc. So the children had to circle the picture that looked most like them. We put them in a private room. They put the form in a sealed envelope and came out and gave it to the coordinator. And after all the children were done, 5 little boys came back and asked the coordinator if they could change their score. They had been comparing notes and decided maybe they could do better. So we thought that was pretty funny.
Thank you. I think we probably have time for 2 more. Real quick, I'm going to ask Professor Frank to respond to the question on touching, funniest, or most interesting experience. And if you could keep it short, please.
Sure. This goes under the heading of you never know where your research will lead you. So when I was working on studies in the UK, there was a brand of laundry detergent who advertised that they were providing, they were soft and their product provided comfort for babies. And they also decided they wanted to donate some funds to a charitable organization. So through interesting networks, they found us and decided to highlight our research on the panel of their laundry box. So for about a year, I would walk into a supermarket and there on the side panel on this laundry detergent, Fairy brand detergent, there was a little panel describing our research on pain in babies and how to donate to that good cause. So you never know where your research will lead you.
That's amazing. Keeping it clean, as they say. Okay, and last to Professor Gilmer, and keep it short because we're running out of time, please. Touching, funniest, or most interesting experience?
Sure. Well, in my research with the impact of animal-assisted interactions, I was very surprised and delighted on Halloween morning when we got into the pediatric hematology oncology clinic with Misha, our teddy bear golden doodle, to be greeted by one of the providers in the clinic with a Halloween costume that mimicked the dog. She had the ears and she had the tail and she had a little skirt and curly leotard, so just like the golden doodle. And it just told me, how much we can impact the providers as well as the families we serve.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I started out my career as a pediatric nurse practitioner, and one of the things I loved about working with pediatrics is you could do just about anything and get away with it.
It's really true.
The kid in you can always be there, and we need to do more of that in adult health, but certainly with children you can get away with it. So thank you all so very much. This has been a wonderful experience for me and to learn from you all. And again, congratulations to all of you for being inducted into the International Researcher Hall of Fame. Tremendous just to be amongst all of you and to see such a great cadre of nurse researchers at Sigma. So thank you very much for taking your time to be with us and to share your wisdom and your pearls of wisdom with our members and attendees of the conference. And I wish you all to be safe, stay away from the COVID virus, and be well. Thank you.
Thank you.